Hi, so this video is an explanation as to the first intermediate period. Now, an intermediate period in the Egyptian chronology is a time when the kingdom was split and there were different rulers claiming to be kings of Egypt. So you could have four nobles pretending to be kings of Egypt. So this first intermediate period, how did it happen? Well, it's really the birth of it is the success of the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom kings were building pyramids and they were transferring lands from central authority to mortuary cults. A lot of those mortuary cults didn't have to pay taxes to the king. That was part of the deal, is that they served the king's spirit and they got tax-free lands. And I think that a lot of those mortuary cults were controlled by the priesthood of Ra at Heliopolis, simply because Imhotep, who designed the first big stone structure, the step pyramid of Djoser, he came from the priesthood of Ra. And in Egypt, because generations were so young, in his case, the nobility would not have lived past 50, maybe 55 tops. They kept with tradition. So he, as a designer and the architect of the step pyramid, suggests that all of those who followed him also came from the priesthood of Ra. So he would have passed on those design techniques to his successors, who also priests of Ra. So that was the first decentralization of kings of Egypt, which was a slow erosion over the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th dynasties. The second erosion of power comes from the nobles, called the nomarchs, who control the cities in Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, I suggested in King and Government that they were probably the brothers and kings of the brothers and cousins of the king. But that was probably true at the beginning of the 3rd dynasty, maybe the 4th. When you get to 5th dynasty, things are changing. The end of the 5th dynasty, the nomarchs are now self-appointing themselves. They are passing those titles onto their sons. So no longer does the king of Egypt during that late 5th dynasty appoint his own nomarchs. He might appoint his viziers, but he's not appointing nomarchs. And they are preferring to be buried in their nomes rather than being buried in the king's necropolis, his pyramid complex. And then we see with Pepi II that he tried to stamp his authority by renaming the ancient capital of Egypt, Memphis, Meneptah, the white walled city, giving it that name Memphis today. So when Pepi II died, the kingdom was split up amongst powerful nomarchs. Now, Manetho, who originally wrote the dynastical families, gives us a hint of the instability. He says that there were 70 kings in the 7th dynasty who ruled Egypt for 70 days each. Well, that's highly unlikely. We certainly don't have 70 names from that period. But what I think it was that his way of saying that there was a lot of instability in Egypt during that time, that there were powerful nomarchs ruling from different parts of Egypt. We know that there was a famine in this first intermediate period, because one nomarch pretending to be a king, who was in the north, said that he fed the victims, the orphans, and the single mums. During that period of famine, it's claimed that people ate their children, they were so hungry. Wow. Well, yeah, I couldn't imagine doing that, but I think it was a demonstration on how awful things were during that first intermediate period. But out of this, we do get some useful information about the future of Egypt, because in southern Egypt, in one of the areas, there are 4 temples. There is the Temple of Karnak, Medamud, Tod, and Armad. And all of those temples have one thing in common. They all worship the war god Montu. And in this 7th dynasty, those 4 temples, villages, towns become a nome. So in the 7th dynasty, they become the nome of Waset, the wise. And Waset is what the Greeks called Thebes, and what we call Luxor today. And out of Waset came the great kings, the Montu kings, the Ammonites, the Senusrets, who were the enlightened kings, as I mentioned earlier. And then later on, you had the New Kingdom kings of the 18th dynasty came from Waset. So all the great kings who unified Egypt came from the south, and all the airy-fairy kings who let it all go dwelled in the north. That's how it was. Anyway, so that's the first intermediate period. I hope it was a reasonable explanation. It's not a favourite period of mine at all, but it just gives you an idea of what was going on. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.